Hi, everyone. I am John Opperman, Executive Director of Earth Day Initiative, and I'm very excited to introduce this conversation today with Pattie Gonia, Maggie Kerrvick of Kiehl's, and artist Benjamin Wong. And I'm going to turn it over right away to Pattie. Go for it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pattie Gonia. I am an environmentalist. I am a drag queen. I'm a frequently sunburnt human being. And I'm so excited to be joining here today with Maggie and Ben. Maggie and Ben, do you want to briefly introduce yourselves and we'll kick this thing off?
Sure. I'm Maggie. I am the Global Head of Sustainability for Kiehl's. Lovely to be here with everyone.
Yeah, this is Benjamin Wong. I'm an artist and activist, and I create giant art installations out of found materials.
Yes, you do. Okay, so we are here today to talk about waste in the beauty industry, but also to talk about circularity. What does circularity mean? It means two major things. It's about making sure the materials don't become waste, but it's also about regenerating the environment because it takes energy and resources to do what we do. So, talking today, we have two incredible people. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with Ben and with Maggie. And little hint, hint here, they know each other because they just got done working on an incredible project. So, Ben and Maggie, will you tell us a little bit about the project you all just worked on?
Sure. Maybe I'll start just by saying that Ben and I met many years ago. We were introduced. I didn't have any context when I first met Ben and was introduced. And probably about 5 minutes at that time, we all used Skype. 5 minutes before the Skype call, I figured it was probably helpful to make sure that I was informed on Ben's work and could be able to navigate a conversation. And no joke, I type his name into Google and immediately begin to a cold sweat. Ben's work was actually one of his pieces was the artwork which was the background to my computer. So I immediately felt like a fan and not ready to have the conversation at all because I was quite nervous. Fast forward a couple of years, Ben and I reconnected. I slid into his DMs to see what kind of ways we could maybe collaborate because I've been a huge fan. And I think the work that Ben does really brings the consumer in and the everyday person into these very complex conversations in a way that is so compelling and beautiful and interesting. So that's a bit of how we met. And Ben, I'll let you tell a little bit about the project.
Yeah, so we just built this giant art installation that lived on the High Line from the 4th to the 17th of April for Earth Month. It was titled Single Use Reflections, and it was sort of like a 10-foot tall, 15 by 15 thing made out of over 20,000 bottles that we attached to highlight how we need to really think more circularly about our consumption habits. So it's made out entirely of household waste items. And there's also a miniature apothecary inspired by how things used to be done from an like 1850s Kiehl's store with like tiny miniature jars. And so someone can take their phone, film like the big problem with this like multi-headed beast and creature kind of emerging, and then just put your phone in to like discover this tiny little miniature world on like what the solution is, because we have done things sustainably in the past and we can do so moving forward in the future. So really excited about that.
That is incredible. The Highline is one of my favorite places, and I love that y'all made it even more beautiful with this art piece. Okay, so Maggie, you're in the hot seat. It's on to you. I'm going to ask you some questions. Are you ready?
I'm so ready, Pattie.
Okay, my first question for you is this. Why? Why is circularity and driving circularity important? Is circularity a hot or a not? Tell me.
It's so hot. So just to maybe set a bit of context, right? Today we operate in a linear economy, right? We take from the environment, we make something, and then we waste it, right? We dispose of it. And that is creating pollution that's pushing our planetary boundaries past their point of return. We have an estimated 1,954 days left before we push our planet's boundaries past their point of return. And so as Ben just alluded to at Kiehl's, we're about longevity. We're a 173-year-old apothecary brand, and we want to be able to service the unique skincare needs of our consumers for another 173 years. But we really recognize that the integrated issues facing business and society really require us to rethink every aspect of our business to help keep materials and resources in play for longer. Why? Because at our current rate of population growth and consumption, we'll need an estimated 3 planets worth of resources by 2050. And today, if we think of resources like a bank account, we're withdrawing from our checking account faster than we're depositing in. In fact, on March 14th, again, if you think of resource use like a bank account, in the United States, we ran out of resources or money, if you will. So our planet just simply can't sustain this trajectory. So in a circular economy, waste is prevented from being produced really in the first place. You can sort of think of it like mimicking nature. And if we think of like a tree, for example, right, in the springtime, the tree blossoms, it supports all this rich biodiversity through the spring and summer, right? You have birds hatching in nests, you have caterpillars that seek refuge and turn into butterflies. Then come the fall, right? The leaves fall, they decompose and they feed nutrients into the soil to help refuel growth for the season ahead, right? Same kind of a concept. So really a circular economy is three core principles: designing out waste and pollution, keeping materials in play, and regenerating nature by moving away from non-renewable sources. So think things like petroleum. And really the change required to combat the climate crisis requires immediate individual and collective action so that we can not only meet the needs of our own needs, but not compromise the ability of future generations to meet theirs.
I love that. How can we as individual people like drive that change though, right? Like that sounds incredible, but how can we drive that change with the companies that we do work with?
I believe the most effective way to empower companies is really to prove the business case. So demonstrate, how are we saving money? Can we create an operational efficiency? Can we mitigate long-term business risk? How do we spark innovation? How do we create more meaningful connections with consumers? So, for us at Kiehl's, our ambition is really to drive a more circular economy by respecting resources, designing out waste, and empowering community, because we recognize all the things I just said. There's unique opportunities for us to reposition our business really for the future. I think you could almost take the words sustainability, circularity out and plop in the word future-proof. That's really what it's about for us.
I love that. When you think about Kiehl's, right? Like you're a human being inside this company. Where do you think is the biggest opportunity that Kiehl's can actually affect change in the circular economy?
So I think if we think about our kind of three buckets of big opportunities, right? First one and the most obvious is reducing impacts. We take a very scientific approach known as a life cycle analysis to drive improvements every time we're touching a product. So think about things like maximizing bio-based and abundant materials, using green sciences to reduce the inputs we need, powering production with renewable energy. But to give you a really concrete example, we're optimizing the design of our jars. So this year we're starting to phase in, starting with our 125 milliliter jar, an optimized design that eliminates 40% plastic, right? When you think of that, the volume that drives year on year, it's incredible. We're also trying to invite our consumers to join us to reuse their favorite products. So we offer multi-use refill pouches that have a twist cap so they're easy to reseal and store, while also maximizing material life cycles. And then last but not least, we know for the consumer, navigating recycling in your local neighborhood is oftentimes confusing. So we try to make it easy. Really, since 2009, we've been inviting our customers to bring back their empties into store. We'll reward you with loyalty points to really try to help divert items from landfill. So those are just a couple ways for us how we think about driving a circular economy.
I love it. I love that you're like meeting people where they're at and helping them succeed in lots of different ways. I think it's about providing different opportunities for people because we behave in different ways to really like meet them where they're at. So I love that. Maggie, you survived the hot seat. Congratulations. High five through this record. This is amazing. Ben, we are on to you. Are you ready?
Yes, so.
In the hot seat with a drag queen. Here we go. Okay, so you spoke a little bit about this amazing art piece that you had made earlier, and I kind of want to like ask you about like when did you become passionate about waste being your material for your art? Like how did this all happen?
Yeah, honestly, by mistake. I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning saying like, "Oh, I really want like to play with trash." It's really not the thing. But I have a background in photography. I was doing large scale epic sets around different things. I was tying people underwater, lighting them on fire, dangling them off rooftops. I was doing all this like fun stuff and getting a bunch of followers and attention. And I think it reached a point where I was like, well, what's the point of getting all this attention if I'm not going to do anything with it? And so I started watching a lot of documentaries. And I think when it comes to looking at the problems of the world, once you see something, you can't really unsee it. You can't go back to saying like, oh, don't need to know that exists. And the environmental documentaries just kind of hit home. And I remember having this one opportunity. I was coming home. My mom had just found a mermaid tail designer. And my sister was getting married. And I was like back in town in Montreal. And I was like, oh my gosh, like a mermaid. It would be really cool to do a project around mermaids. Mermaids live in the ocean. What problems are afflicting the ocean? This was right at the time where the Great Pacific Garbage Patch had just been kind of announced. And I was like, we should just have a mermaid drowning in a bunch of plastic bottles. And I think that project being so successful, I think it hit 36 million views on my native video. It got on the front page of a bunch of newspapers around the world. And I was just like, oh, crap, this is something that people really care about. This is something that's really important. And as life just went on, I just started doing more and more and more of these projects, focusing on different aspects of waste, from ocean plastics to fast fashion to electronic waste, and just went down that roller coaster. And now we're almost 10 years in. And sadly, despite the success of these projects, the problem is almost worse than it's ever been, right? We are producing plastics more every single year, and it's really, really frustrating. And so I keep doing more.
Yeah, I think that like it can often, when we think so big picture, like it can be a thing where it's like, yeah, like where are the opportunities to make change? But I think that through art, there is such an opportunity to make change and open up people's minds. And I have a question for you, which is just, when we think about like climate action, right, we can often think about that it is maybe using less or marching in a rally, but can art be a climate communication tool? What's art's role in the climate movement?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally biased, so I obviously need to believe that art has a purpose. But even in the work that you do, right? Like, art just dazzles people. It attracts attention. It evokes a sense of curiosity, and people feel drawn to it. And so rather than pushing things onto people, I think art has the power to draw people in and invite them into the conversation. And it's not just inviting people who already care, it's inviting people who don't yet know that it's an issue. And so I do this because I'm an artist, but if you're a lawyer or an accountant, that doesn't mean that you can't take your skills and put it to good use. Really, the invitation, I think, is less like, oh, how is art playing this super unique and important role, but rather, how are you showing up in your world, being able to convert whatever it is you're doing in service of the planet, both for yourself and for future generations, right? It's just like, we want to like have a clean house to live in. We don't want to burn our own house down. I think it's just very much the basics. And so even if we feel sometimes very small and overwhelmed by the magnitude of the problem, it really starts by taking back control over our own skills and agency and like converting that into action. And when I think you start doing that and you stop running away from these problems, you start realizing that actually you're not alone. There's like a whole bunch of people who also care about this stuff. And then you find cool collaborators to do things with. And then boom, new magical things that you didn't even know were possible can start happening. And you go from a place of feeling powerless to a place of feeling empowered.
I love so much of what you brought up. And I want to take a second to just like think about that for a second, because I think that one, especially with art, it's able to reach a younger generation who oftentimes knows the climate crisis is so real, is living in the world that previous generations created, right? So it's a communication tool. Art's also a collaboration tool, just like you said too, collaborating. And I love what you mentioned about that. It's not even about art. It's about taking what you're good at and applying it towards what you care about in this world. I think that's the magic sauce, right? That's doing work that's available to us and only us. And that's what we need more of, right? Like, I don't want anyone to just become an artist. That's not their skill set. I don't want someone to suddenly drop everything they're doing and become a lawyer and fight for climate. I want people to use these things and their identities and their skill sets and what makes them feel good. What are those sustainable resources for them, and apply it to what they care about in this world. So I love that you mentioned that. That is so great.
I jump in and ask you, sort of to that same point that Ben just answered, how do you educate people and individuals to move in a more positive direction in a topic that's oftentimes quite complex?
I get asked this question a lot, and I think the most real answer I can ever tell you is that we're asking a lot of people right now to fight for this planet, but we're forgetting a very important first step, which is a connection to this planet. It seems silly, but going outside, connecting to this thing, realizing how worth it this planet is to save, I think is some of the most important work that we all can do, right? Having a relationship with this thing, because we fight for what we love, right? So we have to go outside. We have to connect with one another and connect to these things so that we know how worth it is to save. I really think that a lot's possible when we can remember that first connection. So yeah, that's how I encourage people to take action on climate, is to think about the names of the plants in their own backyard more than like brand names they see in this world, novel concept these days. So yeah, y'all, this has been so beautiful. I really appreciate y'all so much. I want to leave with just one question I have for each of you, which is, what is giving you hope lately? When we think about circularity, when we think about this work, your unique roles, what is giving you hope when it comes to the climate movement? You have 2 sentences to answer this question. So this is a challenge for you. Maggie, do you maybe want to go first? What's giving you hope in this world?
I think what gives me hope is to see the energy around the movement and the real connection people are making between the life they want to have long term and the life that they want to leave behind for the generation that comes behind us. And I think there's a real, I think there's been a huge shift as well, just from a business perspective of we're going to compete on these topics where the reality is even if I deliver every goal that we've set for 2030, right? I'm not going to alone solve the climate crisis. So being able to move in community, find ways that we can collaborate with unusual partners, right? Maybe Ben, maybe a year ago, wouldn't have thought that we would be maybe sitting across the table together working on something like we just did on the High Line. So I think these unique collaborations, the energy and the enthusiasm and the real acknowledgement that we're not having to negotiate that there's this issue that's looming and kind of coming at us at the speed of light, but rather there's a real willingness to try and experiment and really rally behind solutions where we see proven results. So I think that's what gives me the most hope.
I love that.
Yeah.
Ben,
Yeah, I think in my case, it's always going to go down to people. Like I love seeing people like you, like Maggie, who are coming together and collaborating and working together and making the topic more fun, more playful, more compelling. I mean, there's so much doom and gloom, and to be fair, there is a lot of that actually happening. But like we need to be able to find ways of inviting people to the campfire. Like you don't want to be the person that no one wants to invite at the party. You want to be the person that's fun and playful and cool and energizing and reinvigorating. And I think if we can bring so much more of that energy into the space, then we can all feel like we're going somewhere to create and craft the world that we all want to live in, and not one that's just like restraining us and putting us in boxes. And so it's great to be here with you guys, and thank you for the conversation. Thanks for hosting us.
Yes,
yes,
thanks.
thank you all so much. Yeah, I think what's giving like me hope lately are people like y'all and everyone that's watching this. I think it's the movement, right? It's every single person for their impact, whether that's through art or through like sustainability within a company, or whether that's through your daily actions. What can we all do to make those 1% changes that have such a big impact and snowball over time, right? So let's remember that nature is a relative, not a resource. Let's think about circularity in our lives, in the economy, within business. And I think we can design a better future. So thank you all so much for the time. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Earth Day. Happy Earth Day, everyone.
Happy birthday.
I'm gonna go outside after this. So
Same.